Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Musto from Siemens Digital Industry Software, and welcome to Pioneers, Startups from Dreams to Reality, our Siemens Startup podcast where we dive into the journeys of groundbreaking startups that are reshaping industries with cutting-edge innovation. I'm joined today with my co-host, Jim Granat, who will introduce himself in a moment. And then we'll get to our guest very, very soon. Let's dive in. Jim, want to just give a quick introduction?
Paul, thanks for having me on. Great to be here again. Excited to learn about one of our newest startup team members, but we'll get to that in a second.
So, as Jim alluded, we have a very, very special guest today. As some listeners may be aware, Kevin Blevins was a longtime host of this podcast channel. He retired at the beginning of this year. So we have somebody new joining the team who has an incredible background. I'm going to let her share that with you. Just in short, her story exemplifies resilience, vision, and leadership in the face of extraordinary odds. From fleeing Cambodia as a child to founding one of Canada's premier automation companies, Peng's journey is a masterclass in resilience, innovation, and leadership. She was the founder of Transformix, an executive, a strategic advisor, board member, and one of Canada's influential women in tech and manufacturing. Peng Cao, welcome to Siemens and welcome to the show. We are so incredibly pleased to have you as part of the team.
Thank you, Paul and Jim. I'm so excited to be joining your team. I just love what you guys are doing at Siemens. I've known Siemens for a long time as the CEO of Transformix, who was a supplier. So now to be part of the family and part of the team and to help startups. I mean, I don't know that there's anything better than this. So I'm very excited. Thank you for the opportunity. I started a company, so I'm a founder and entrepreneur. I still own a machine shop, an angel investor, board member. I do a lot of volunteer work. So I do a lot of things because I get bored easily and I just like to keep busy.
I'd love to start at the beginning because your story is so incredibly inspiring in every aspect of it, right? So why don't you take us back to how you started, maybe a little bit about your family and kind of talk through that.
Yeah, so I was born in Cambodia. My parents are Chinese from Guangdong, which is like southern China across from Hong Kong. And they left China in their teenage year because I think that was around the Cultural Revolution when there was a lot of starvation. So they left to find a better life, and they did. They were both very poor farmers. My mother, I think, had a grade 1 education. My father had a grade 2. So life was really difficult, and they got married in Cambodia, but they were very entrepreneurial. So they started a company. My father had, my mom used to talk about how he only slept 3 hours a night to build this bicycle manufacturing parts. And because he couldn't read and write, everything was done on a handshake. And so I used to remember as a kid asking my parents, and my mom was such an inspiring woman. She's probably one of the women that sometimes I still get emotional. Both of my parents have gone. She's one of the women that I looked up to the most. I always talked about how, a lot of the HR I've learned as a CEO actually came from her, who is uneducated, but one of the wisest person I have ever met in my life. She taught herself how to read and write, but my father never really did. And they were always really ashamed of the way they write the Chinese character, because if you look at Chinese character, it's almost like an art. So in spite of all of that, and back then in Cambodia, there's no angel investment, no loans, none of that. So it's really from scratch. My father slept very little. Even when the staff are sleeping, he'd be the one like out machining parts or doing whatever. And so they built a company from the ground up. I was born in 1970. The war in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge was a civil war. They invaded. The capital city, Phnom Penh, fell in 1974. The Khmer Rouge, which is a communist party, basically turned the entire country back to a farm country. Everything was destroyed. Everyone was forced into farming. We went into a work camp, and the only reason we survived is because of my parents' humble beginning as farmers, and so they were able to pretend that they were farmers and not executive and not business owner. Otherwise, our entire family would have been killed. The other thing that I brought up, and we'll talk again later on about how they treat people, was the main reason we survived, because the person in charge of our work camp was a former employee. And he remembered how my parents treated him at a time when there were no labor law. They treated him like family, and because of that, we were saved. Eventually, Vietnam invaded Cambodia in 1978. We escaped. We went back to Phnom Penh, built a life in terms of like using rice as currency, using rice to make enough money to get some gold, and then hire somebody to help us escape to Thailand. There was a refugee camp there. We ended up getting mugged lost everything. And fortunately, there was a Red Cross truck that found us in a horrific stage and brought us to a refugee camp. And that's where my life kind of begun. I was around 9 years old. At the refugee camp, that's when we were able to try to reach out to family members who had left before the Civil War. I had a twin brother in Taiwan. I had cousins in Canada, in LA, and everyone's trying their best to sponsor us to get us out of that nightmare. Canada was the first country that accepted us as refugee. And so we went to Canada in 1980 as refugees. And with nothing but the clothes on our back, the government gave us a pair of shoes, a change of clothes.
And that was not with a small family. I mean, you might have mentioned how many siblings you have.
Yeah, so there are 11 of us. My oldest sister was taken during the war, during the killing fields, where 33% of the population were either starved, worked, or killed, or tortured to death. So my oldest sister was taken. 2 of my oldest brothers were sent to Taiwan at 14 to escape the Civil War. So during the war, there were 7 of us, and then my youngest brother was born at the refugee camp. So yeah, it was a big family, and most of my family these days are entrepreneurs. All my siblings are business owners of some sort or another in Canada. Almost all my uncles and everybody, like that's the world it came from, is entrepreneurship. If you can start a little company, even like street vendor, you do that.
I mean, that's a pretty interesting thing in the formative part of your life to see, wow, my parents treated employees this way. It's really unique that you get to see some of the fruit of that when it was a really tough time and how it kind of came from. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's what really inspired me to treat the employees the way I did at Transformix. And we heard at this conference about, your team being like the number one reason that angels and VC invested in companies. My parents didn't understand any of that. They just understood how they wanted to treat someone else if they were in their shoes. And so I was inspired when I was growing up listening to my mother. My mother, as I mentioned earlier, had a grade 2 education. I always call her a closet feminist because growing up in a traditional Chinese family and being a girl, I was always told what I couldn't do, including leaving home for university, right? Because that brought shame to the family. My mother was a closet feminist because she was always proud of things I did. If there was a title for her back then, she would be like an HR director or a VP. She was the one that took care of, we had cook, we had chauffeurs, we had maids, we had nannies for each of the children. But she was the one that managed all of that relationship. And so growing up, she was the one that taught me that you never disciplined in front of everybody, right? You discipline quietly, privately, and you compliment in public. That wasn't like my business degree that taught me that. That was my mother. When my siblings started an Asian grocery store in Regina, my dad was giving them advice that Sam Walton was giving in his book. But my dad didn't read that book. He doesn't speak English,
You mentioned your time at Queen's University. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about that time and what really prompted you to, hey, I think this is for me. I want to go do this.
I think Queen's really opened my eyes. It was the first time that I was allowed to leave home where I felt really constricted and restricted, being my parents are very conservative, right? I'm supposed to be a good Chinese girl, and I was not. I was independent and strong-willed and ambitious, and there's all these dreams and things that I wanted to do. But I was told, being good Chinese girls learn how to cook and clean to keep a happy home. I'm supposed to go to the local college, get a little degree, get a little job, and just have a happy family. Well, that wasn't me. I was like, no. So my family is currently still in Regina, Saskatchewan. Queen's University is in Ontario, so several provinces away. And I was the first child to leave home for university. I did that because Queen had all these scholarships. In fact, I wasn't allowed to leave home, so I had applied in secret. The scholarship kept coming in, and one day, my mom and I were putting on the laundry, and there was another letter, and she said, oh, what's that? And I said, well, it's another scholarship. And she's like, another scholarship? How much money have you gotten? So I told her, and she's like, okay, you're going to Queen's, but we're not going to tell your grandma because, your sister left home unmarried. She went to work for one of the biggest telecom company, right? It's not like something to be ashamed of. But she's like, I already let your sister leave home without being married first. So I'm not going to let a second daughter leave home doing that or without being married first. So we're not going to tell your grandma. Anyway, we didn't tell my grandma. I went to Queen's University. And I think it was there that it was just eye-opening to meet all these kids from around the world. And I wasn't restricted by all these traditions that told me what I couldn't do. The thing that I remember the most was even though I was, quote unquote, a bad Chinese girl and rebellious in their eyes, I was still a very obedient individual back then, right? I had applied to go on an exchange program. I think I was like 1 point below what the acceptable average was. Being a good Chinese girl in that environment, I didn't fight the system. It's like, okay, you know what? I wasn't allowed, so okay, fine. And it was this prof who said, I was waiting for you to come and fight for the reason why you should have been accepted or allowed to go on this exchange program, but you didn't. And I think that statement to this day is a reason that I refuse to give up no matter what the obstacle is. And it was Queen's University that I met all my former business partners that allowed me to combine my business degree with their engineering degree to start the company.
So now you're going to start your company.
Yes.
You're going to start a company.
Yes.
Talk us through that and how that all came about. And how long after you graduated from Queen's did you embark on this?
So when I graduated, I went to Toronto. And funny enough, I was actually in the software industry. It was a horrible experience in that culturally, the way they treated people was horrific. So I'll give you an example. I had someone that worked for me whose mother was dying. And he said, Peng, I need time off. And I said, of course, let me go talk to the client. Spoke to the client. Client's like, of course, no problem at all. I mean, come on, this is compassionate situation, right? Went to my boss, like, well, he can take time off, but we can't pay him because he doesn't have vacation time. And so there's all these stories. I was only there for 9 months, but it felt like 9 years of my life was taken from me. They taught me what not to do in terms of treating people, and my mother taught me what to do. Because of that experience, I was like, you know what? I can't work for other people. So that taught me that I want to start my own company. I want to shape my own destiny. My former partners and I, or my ex-husband, started Transformix in our basement with nothing but a computer. It was like a $1,000 loan from the bank for a computer. Take my sales hat on. I start pounding the basement, cold calling. Back then, we didn't have email. So I went to the city chamber of commerce, grabbed their directory, looked at anything that says manufacturing. And I just start calling everybody. I just start driving on in Ontario, we have this major highway called the 401, just up and down the 401. Start, going to plants and talking to them. Things really turned around. I had called the plant manager. 3M Canada had built a new plant near us. And I called the plant manager, and this guy was great, Tony. And he said, yeah, come on in. Let's, you can present to our engineering team. And I went in with like nothing, no PowerPoint. I had a business card that I had just print off that I cut into a little strip to look like a business card. We came out of that meeting and Tony's like, how'd it go? I said, oh, it was horrible. There's this guy named Dave. He was really hard on us. And Tony said, oh, don't worry about Dave. He's like that to everybody. Well, whole and behold, Dave called just before the Christmas break in 1996 and hired us as an engineering contracting company. And I had a big sign that says, we got 3M. So that was our humble beginning. And then we just built from that.
What were some of the difficult decisions and situations that you were in that you had to overcome?
There's so many challenges as an entrepreneur. Somebody once said that, being an entrepreneur is like eating or swallowing broken glasses and smiling at the same time, right? It's not for the faint of heart. You have to be mentally, physically tough and psychologically tough. There's a lot of tough decisions. But I think that one of the toughest one was we had this massive contract in early 2000, I think it was. We were making really good money. We were giving great bonuses for the staff. And it was a 28 million US contract. And we were in phase one of what are going to be a 10-phase partnership with this European company. We were negotiating phase two when I realized something wasn't quite right because they weren't responding to us. And sure enough, eventually we learned that it wasn't our machines that was the problem. It was because they were trying to grow an agricultural product and then didn't take into consideration some of the issue when you're trying to grow a natural, sugarcane in this situation. So we were making really good money. That was like 90% of our revenue. And I tried to turn the company around by expanding to other business. But when you're a small company, you put all your eggs into one basket, even when you shouldn't, right? But it was such a good opportunity when it came that we couldn't turn it down. My controller, my family, everybody. At that time, we had zero debt. We had paid off everybody. We were giving good bonuses. We had good cash flow. We had cash in the bank. And, I was going through a divorce. I was buying on my ex, who was a partner. And everyone was like, Peng, this is the time to look after yourself. Take the money that's in the bank right now, divide it among the shareholders, partners, and just close down the company. I decided that there were too many people who were loyal to us, who helped build this business with me. These were employees who have gone through difficult times with me, and I was not going to abandon them. So I ignored all that advice, and I took the money that we had, and we invest heavily into a digital transformation and developed the technology called CNC Assembly, which is eventually in 6 years was acquired for 8-figure valuation.
At what point did you kind of say, and it might be that, but I just want to clarify for our audience. I think the entrepreneur, whenever they're building a company, we hear this point where they're saying, I made it. We made it. We're going to be okay. Could you define that spot, that night, that conversation where it's like, we made it?
The challenge being a startup and entrepreneur that wants to build a lasting enterprise is you never stop to say, I made it. Because the minute you do that, you sit on your laurel and you never grow. And I'm not that person. I'm always looking to how can I grow? How can I grow my company? How do I build a sustainable company? I didn't build a company to, make a living for myself. I wanted to build an enterprise that lasts. I don't think there was ever a moment that I felt I made it, because there was always something else that, while everybody felt that, or everybody felt when they get their bonus, yeah, this is great, we made it. I was like, no, we're on to the next thing, So yeah, I don't think I ever made it, even when I exit.
No, I think that's really interesting to think, because entrepreneurs are people of action. I think it might lead into this idea, just to kind of unpack. I don't know if you have a framework for your leadership philosophy, but could you maybe describe for the audience what you would characterize as your leadership philosophy? These are the things that would kind of define your style, what's important. Could you describe that?
Yeah, I think my leadership style is I really, because of my parents' teaching, think about how I want to be treated. And I'm of the belief that I hire the best people, the brightest people, the people who are smarter than me, and let them do their job. So my leadership style is allowing people to openly speak their mind. I can't be right all the time. There's no such thing. None of us can be right all the time. So it's very casual in the boardroom. Everyone has time to speak their mind. And we felt that if the leaders could come together into an agreement, whatever that is, it's going to be really brilliant. I hire people who share the same philosophy as me. The philosophy is really important. And those values are I square RP. I is for integrity. I don't want to have to guess what you think. I don't want you to put on this political face and only tell me what I want to hear. I just tell my leaders, I'm like, I'm really good at convincing me why I'm right. Because in my head, I am brilliant. I need you to tell me what I don't know or the missing gap, right? So integrity. Say what you do what you say. And that goes for, with among the leadership, with the employees, with the suppliers, with the customers. One of the greatest compliment I got was a supplier. We, at the time, owed them $150,000 was a new supplier. I didn't know how to pay him back because we were going through one of those horrible downturn. And so instead of hiding, I came up with a payments plan, and I called him up and I said, this is what what I can do today. Here's the payment schedule. And he said, Peng, I've done my due diligence on you, and the word on the street is your word is gold. And that's what I try to teach my kids too. It's it takes a lifetime for that integrity and to build that reputation, and a split second to lose it all. My team, that's number one. If I can't trust what you say, if you lie to me once, that's it. I can't trust you anymore. You can't be part of my team. So if I can't trust you, I can't trust what you tell me. So how can we make good decisions? So integrity, respect. We can be lively and debate each other, but we have to be respectful. And that's really important to me. Passion. You can probably tell I'm very passionate about a lot of subject. And so they have to be passionate about, wanting to work together, or be passionate about the industry, or, they have to bring that to the game. I don't want someone's I don't want to be here. Well, then don't be here. And I used to have these round table, meetings with the entire company. I'm like, there's the door. I'm not for everybody. This company isn't for everybody. I'm not offended. I'm not married to you. If you need to leave, go. I've hugged employees who resigned. I'm like, you know what? That's cool. I've had employees who resigned or I've let go, come back years later and thank me for that. The other I is innovation. And when I talk about innovation, I'm not just talking about technology. Innovation comes in many forms. Innovation comes in how you think about doing something differently instead of the traditional way of doing stuff. And, we were young. I like to use the word stupid because we didn't know any better. So we get to be innovative in how we went about building our business and treating people and doing stuff. And so innovation or being innovative was critical to my management team.
So phenomenal. Very insightful and inspirational. I got to tell you. So you're now the company's growing. You're successful, and you're leading into an acquisition. So kind of talk us through that. And I always feel like with a startup company, it's kind of bittersweet, right? You built this thing, that's beautiful thing that you love and adore, and you have so much, and now somebody else is going to be taking it to something, right? So talk us through that.
When we develop that technology, we get a lot of question about, are you ready for acquisitions and whatever? I'm like, no. I think when you're an entrepreneur, especially your first company, it's kind of like your first child. I call Transformix my first child, right? Because you birth it from the basement. My first manufacturing was one of the partners' garage. And so you birth that thing. You take, it's kind of like a child. The beginning is so hard. Everything needs your attention. You work crazy hours because that child can't do anything without you. And so you build it, you grow it. And then as you grow, it's independent of you. You have an executive team that's taking care of stuff, but it's still your child. So we never thought that we were going to sell the company. But, I'm also a business person. And I always joke that if you put enough zero behind a number that I like, I'm always willing to talk.
You're a capitalist at the end of the day.
I am extremely capitalistic. Come on. And so we actually did not intend to sell. We initially went to the company that acquired us because they were the largest competitor in our industry. And we wanted them to license the technology because we were going to go disrupt another industry with the background IP. And we had a company in Europe that wanted us to do that wanted to partner with us. Within half an hour, they wanted to acquire it. Within 5 months, the deal was signed. I think part of the reason a lot of entrepreneurs don't stay with a company that acquired them is exactly the same reason I felt, where it's like, it's your baby. You had a vision for that baby. You know where you want to lead it. Now you're part of this big corporate conglomerate with all kinds of bureaucracy and red tape and, they have their own idea of what they want, of course, and they have every right to be. It's their money that acquire you, right? So they have every right to do what they want. It's hard. We'll leave it at that.
Taking one step back, the way, some of the ecosystem, how startups are growing, you're describing this time period. What was the angel investor community? What was the investor community like? Did you have venture capital money? Had you gone through some raises? Just describe that.
We started the company at a time, especially in Canada, where entrepreneurship was not a vocabulary in the community, right? And so there was no incubators. There's nothing. There's really nothing to support people that wants to start a company. You were just kind of on your own. So we had love fun from friends and family to kind of start the first product. Even when we developed the CNC assembly technology, it was my family that invested heavily in that. We tried to raise a VC round later on in our journey because we want to expand globally. So in 6 years, we developed 5 generations, we patented 4 continents, we sold in 4 continents. If you read the book, Crossing the Chasm, these were all these issues that company goes to die, right? Because we couldn't cross the chasm. So in order to cross the chasm, I was trying to raise money. So I was going through the VC route. It was a very antagonist situation because I knew her boss and I reached out to her boss and saying, listen, we have a really disruptive technology. You need to talk to us because we're selling in Europe, we're selling in Asia, we're selling South America. You need to talk to us. It was a women fund. She came in, sat in her boardroom, refused to go to our shop. And, I present what we were doing. And she looked at me and go, what are you, a hardware or a software company? And I said, I'm both. She said, you can't be both. I said, okay, that little toy dog that advertised at Christmas time that kids play with that bark and all of that? Well, that little plastic thing without all the software is just a little plastic looking dog. Without the hardware, the software is nothing. So it's both. But instead of acknowledging that maybe she's wrong, she got really offended. She's like, well, it seems like you can't decide whether you're hardware or software, so we can't invest. And then she left.
You touched on the concept of a woman-led business, and I know you faced a number of different obstacles, sexism, racism a little bit. You've always been able to overcome that and push forward from your story. What advice would you give other people that have some women disadvantage in the world of startups?
What my message to young people or anyone who's willing to listen is that there's going to be obstacle in life, right? Whether you look like me, a short, less than 5 feet, Chinese woman who doesn't speak perfect English. I still leave out S's in words that I should add in when I shouldn't. You're going to face racism, sexism, and whatever other prejudice people have against you when they first look at you. It doesn't matter. To me, it's just a big boulder that whether it's physically or mentally or psychologically that's been placed in front of me. And I have to figure out how to smash it, crawl through it, dig a hole through it, climb through it. I don't care what it is. And if it's really bad because of your own prejudice, I will go somewhere else. I don't need to be in the same table as you. I don't need to be in the same room as you. And so why focus on all the negative instead of like, well, what can I do differently? I can't help you if you don't like me, Jim. I'm very vocal. And, I spent most of my career being the only woman in a boardroom. Focus on what you can do because you cannot control all the other stuff around you.
That's fabulous. So I guess jumping forward, you're here at Siemens.
Yes.
Said it before. We're so pleased and honored to have you here. So what brought you to Siemens? What attracted you to Siemens?
You, Paul.
And that's a wrap. There you go.
That's a wrap. That's it.
That's the tagline.
Yeah. No, so when I first heard of this program, it's like Siemens startup program, like what? I'm always like interested when I hear like big global company have a startup program, right? So I'm like, okay, I got to learn more because as an angel investor and a coach and a mentor for Techstar Detroit and another company in Ottawa, another incubator, it's like, I got to bring this to my network. Like they got to know about this. So that's when I called Paul. And, like within half an hour, we just hit it off and I just had such a great conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love the program. This guy's awesome. And, it was a unique thing to meet someone like Paul who grew up in the corporate world, but kind of really understood the startup space. And that was just such a unique situation. And then this opportunity came up and I was like, no way. Like, this is too good to be true. So I applied and I'm just really excited.
Yeah, I think the piece that excites us, I'll just say the collective team, is the fact that you have experience not only founding a company, developing a company, growing a company as a founder, but now you're involved with startups as an advisor. You're on boards, advisory boards. You are integrated into the startup ecosystem. So you understand so many different dimensions of the startup world, including the investor. You're an angel investor as well, which is just remarkable. I think you're going to bring so much value to the startups that we work with as Siemens. I really do see the startups that we work with as partners, right? Like we want to be engaged with them, we want to work with them, and we want them to be successful. You just bring a wealth of experience that's going to really help us get there. So
I'd like to take that chance though to, if we could, let's on that idea of like looking forward, a little bit about Pang. We're going to call this the rapid fire section, if that's okay, right? We'll ask a couple questions. You can speak on the topic for 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Oh.
Unless it's really good, and then we'll give you more. But let's try to keep it. All right. Question number 1, right? Favorite comfort food?
Ooh, there's a dish it's in Chinese called congee. It's like a rice porridge. And that's my comfort food when I'm not feeling well. My mom used to make it all the time. Very simple. Like literally water, rice, boil, and add some eggs at the end. That's it.
Really?
Yeah.
And it tastes good.
Oh, if I make it for you, Paul, you're going to love it. You're going to be like, all right, I love this congee thing.
That's good.
We're going to have a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hungry now.
For all of you guys.
I'll make you an espresso. You make me congee.
That's right.
All right, number two, ready? Book that influenced you the most?
There are many. I would say that Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People. I've read that a few times. And from a commercialization, Crossing the Chasm, I read religiously. And that's what a lot of the strategy I use to commercialize disruptive technologies.
Did you read those books back when you were running your company, your startup company? And
we were a custom automation company. But then when we developed CNC assembly, I made all my leadership team read it. And then we developed our commercialization strategy. And we sold over 30 millions in 6 years because we developed a very concise commercialization strategy of how we wanted to go to the market. And then when I joined ATS, I was like, okay, crossing the chasm doesn't work for a global company. So the second book is called Zone to Win. And that's about how when you are commercializing a disruptive technology in a global company, the strategies are slightly different. And so I adopt that strategy at ATS and took Symphony global.
I love it. That's great. Would you be willing to confess guilty pleasure?
Oh, okay. My guilty pleasure is I love shoes.
Shoes.
Clothes. Purse. I don't know.
It's kind of interesting, right? And I don't know if I'm just making this connection now that like you're saying shoes and like clothes, those were things that like they were kind of robbed from you.
Yes.
Like in a formative state. I just want to acknowledge that humanity side of you that's like, you know, you didn't really have that. And now it's like you have the chance to enjoy it. It's cool that you appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's really important to have those things and not just have them, but to know why and to appreciate it. And that's really important.
I love that you brought that up, Jim, because I think you're absolutely right. I still remember the first dress that my mom has ever bought for me. I was probably about 11 or 12 years old because we came to Canada, remember, very, very poor. So I remember that dress. I can describe to the details. And it's been like 40 odd years. I think you hit it on the spot.
Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. I think it was an amazing hour that we spent talking about it. It was incredible that you shared so much of yourself and your experiences in developing your company and how you kind of overcame those obstacles and brought you to where you are today. So one of the $1 million questions, though, are you going to be hosting the podcasts going forward?
I am. And thank you for that opportunity. I'm so excited because I am so energized and looking forward to meeting the startups that is working with us and going to become our partners. So yeah, thank you. I'm going to be the host the next time around. So yeah, this is great.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear them. So, and with that, to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Pioneers. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with us. You can learn more about Siemens startup programs at www.siemens.com/startups.software.solutions. Also, do you want to give your email address?
Yeah, it's peng-sang, so PENG-sang, SANG.CAU@siemens.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Peng Sang Ka.
And me, I'm very simple, paul.musto@siemens.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, innovation has no boundaries.